What is up, y'all? Dan back at you with another video. I'm back with the guides. This one is going to be a build guide around Void Titan. This is going to use some of the artifact stuff that makes a lot of orb generation and just amps it up to 100 basically. In this build, this is going to be the first build that I've used, I think, ever, that's also taking advantage of glaives, specifically the Excalibur. In this build, you'll see some stuff that I suggest that you can always take advantage of or just mix up to help your playstyle. But I do think this build is useful in solo content and team-based content, and just like a lot of the other builds, the more enemies you have the ability to fight and defeat, the better this build is going to be in the long run. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, let's go over the loadout that we are using for this. This slot is a freebie slot. Depending on what you're using, you can use it for SMGs for having overload. You can use it for hand cannons, snipers, shotguns. Currently I'm using it just for auto loading, warple, and disorienting grenades, just to blind everything in the field so I can stay fighting more often. Sometimes what I will do is trade out Excalibur for just a blinding GL here, and for DPS putting on Outbreak or Quicksilver, or my favorite, Lumina. It's one of the builds that I use when I'm sherping people through raids. With this build with Lumina and just a Void GL, preferably you would want this set up with a Void GL that can replace Excalibur. Only one that we currently have is Harsh Language with Repulsor Brace. If you are able to have that, then I would honestly use that over Excalibur, simply because you still have the free slot of it being an exotic somewhere else. So you use Izanagi, you can use Outbreak, Lumina, or whatever. But until then, I think just running double specials for the most part, or running something like a SMG for very specific like overloads, is a fantastic choice. Using Excalibur though will allow you to have unstoppable, anti-barrier, because we're always going to be in a state of volatile, and if you put on SMG, then you have all three barrier champions, barrier, unstoppable, and overload taken care of no matter what. Now we're going to look at the loadout, and what I like to run is Tower and Barricade, just to get my cooldown as low as possible. I run it with Offensive Bulwark, Vortex Grenade, Controlled Demolition, and Echo of Starvation, Echo of Expulsion, Echo of Undermining, Echo of Provision. Like I always like to do, there's one thing that you can swap out depending on how you like to play. What I like to run is Echo of Starvation, which is a must-have in my opinion. Every time you pick up an Orb of Power, you get Devour. With this build, we're always going to be having Orbs of Power anyway, so you might as well have a constant state of Devour always available to us. With this build, I also don't think it's super necessary to run the mods that increases the duration of like Void Grenades or Devour, or just things like that. So you can take that and then put on Echo of Expulsion, which of course makes everything explode. It's a must-have, especially when paired with Controlled Demolition. And then I like to use Echo of Undermining. This is the one that I think you can mix up and move out of this build if you don't really need it. For me, I'm going to be tossing grenades all the time anyway. Might as well do more damage to everything and weaken. But that's just my personal preference. This is the one that you can swap out. Ones that I've kind of messed around with when I'm not using Echo of Undermining is defeating targets while your shields are depleted grants you a temporary overshield. This is just another way of just having your overshield, which then gives you your increased regeneration. It being temporary, I don't really like. It also requires you to have your shield broken. I don't really like as well, because again, we're always going to be in a state of Devour. But if for some reason you like that, put it on. Another thing that I like to run is Echo of Cessation. I think that's how you say it, where finishers give you volatile and makes everything around you volatile. It's okay. I ran it, I tried it. I didn't really find it necessary because again, we're in a state of always Devour. We already have volatile 99% of the time anyway. so I don't really find much use with this as well. But it really depends. You know, there's some options out here you can go for. If you really want to toss more melees, you can do Echo of Exchange, but I kind of feel there's not a lot of better choices, so you might as well have just weakening across everything. I also like this a lot because this can work in solo encounters and group encounters. In a lot of my Sherpa raids, I'll just run Armamentarium like this build, run double weakening nays, and even if we don't have a tether, or even a tether is not up, or whatever, you always are weakening. And even when you're in solo play, you're always weakening. It's being able to have as many abilities and as many buffs and debuffs up as often as possible, no matter if you're playing solo in a 3-person fire team or a 6-person fire team. And then the last thing is just Echo of Provision. Because we're always going to be tossing grenades, we're going to get a lot of melee energy back, which allows us to throw more shields, which every time we throw a shield, each target is going to give us a chunk of our overshield. The more we can toss those, the better. I just like the synergy, and like I said, I just think there's not a lot of better choices. You could go for the final blows with the melees, restart health regeneration, but again, always in a constant state of devour, so every kill should give you that. If you just don't want to do that, then you could also go for the finisher to make you invisible, but I just don't personally like that build in Titan. So going back to the loadout, again, the primary weapon is up to you. It's your free spot. The way I like to run it is depending on what champion I'm dealing with, I just always use my machine gun as if it is a primary, and then I just fill in as necessary with void stuff elsewhere. On the helmet, I like to run just some a resilience mod. I like to get 100 resilience at all times. There's no reason not to. You don't really need a whole lot of recovery. I like tier 6, tier 7 because we're always in a state of devour, so we don't need to focus on recovery because every kill is going to give us full health. I also like a lot of discipline because every time we pick up that orb of power, every time we just build upon keeping devour, we're making orbs, we get more void nays, more void ability, all that stuff just synergizes very well. Going back to this, on the helmet, like a lot of my builds, I like to run Scout and Finders. I like to run Heavy because with bricks from beyond from the artifact, we're making Heavy. It's just more way of making Heavy for myself and my fire team. These two are very important as well. Shadow Orbs, every time we break a shield, especially Void Shield, we're just making orbs. You can also change this depending on what you're fighting. I have like a Forbearance for Arc, Empty Vessel for Solar. So no matter what you're running, you can take advantage of Shadow Orbs in this build, depending on what you're running. On the gloves, I like to put on my heavy-handed and my firepower. Every time I get a melee kill, a charge melee kill, and a grenade kill, I make orbs of power. Picking up those orbs of power just give me more abilities, it gives me more health, it gives me more abilities into my super. Momentum transfer is also what I like to run because again, causing damage with a grenade decreases, or I guess reduces, my melee cooldown. Just gets me closer to getting another overshield from my melee. So we want to dive into getting a lot of abilities, dive into getting a lot of orbs, and using one abilities build to going into another abilities build. Because we're running a lot of void, I like to run triple void weapon surge. They only cost 1 if you put on the void siphon, the void authorized mods void artifact. So you might as well use that, so you can have 3 of them and not cost a lot. That's an extra 22% damage to your void machine gun, to your void glaive, and any other void weapons you are using. I'm only using a mobility forge just to get me to the tier 4. Nothing else is really worth it. This is also artifice armor. And then on the class item, I like to run double bomber as always, and time dilation. This is going to give me a very long armor charge, so I can have that 22% up as often as I like. And then bombers, of course, every time I pop my class ability, I get a chunk of my grenade back. And as always, because we're picking up so many abilities, we're gonna always have it. If you don't need it, if you don't need triple, then as always, you can put Absolution, which honestly is a little bit better because every time you pick up all those orbs, you're gonna have more abilities way more often. But because I'm already seeing the abilities up so often in the majority of content, I kind of chose to triple down on Void Weapon Surge, but your mileage may vary. So if you feel that you need to take advantage of Absolution, you should definitely have enough room to just swap one of them, and still you're doing 17% more damage with Void Weapons, and you're just going to have more abilities. Just you take advantage of it how you think best works for your build. Of course, we're building around Armamentarium. We don't really need Heart of Immortal Sight because Heart of Immortal Sight, of course, was nerfed, but unlike my solar build, we're not focusing on the abilities as much as using the abilities to utilize our damage buffs across Corrective Measure, which is our main weapon. You don't need to have Corrective Measure, but you do want a machine gun that's void. A lot of people like Retrofit. You definitely want something that's going to give you a damage buff off of grenades with a golden tricorn or adrenaline junkie. And if possible, you want something to give you more abilities back from another perk, which is why I like Demolitionist. It's also really good because I'm just tossing grenades all the time anyway, so there's not a lot of times I have to reload because of Demolition. I think the build is really strong, and then because of machine guns and their buff this season, especially in the new raid, you can take this and do pretty solid damage inside of a damage encounter. It isn't Thunderlord, but it is really good because you're going to have the extra damage buff from weapon surges. You're going to never have to reload in a damage phase because of Demolitionist, and you got Armamentarium, so you're always going to have that. You're going to be able to slay out everything because of Volatile. You're going to weaken everything. It is a fantastic all-around build no matter what content you're doing. If you just want to put on a build and just run raids, run Nightfalls, run Battlegrounds or whatever, and you always want to just top frag, have the most orbs generated, the most kills generated, I cannot speak highly enough to this build, and I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. Granted, you can tweak it a little bit if you really want those overshields, which is going to make this build even better. Using Vest Caliber is fantastic. Just using the block button is going to give you a chunk of overshield to you and your allies, which then puts you in that state of just having higher amounts of ability regeneration back because of offensive bulwark, which is the other thing I like to run. So you kind of see where we're going with this. We're exploding everything with controlled demolitionists and our fragments. With the other aspect, we're having a lot of overshields as often as possible, so we have higher grenade charges and melees, like increase your damage and all that stuff, and giving overshields for melees. So the more we can have that up, the better. So that's the Void Titan. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully it makes you an absolute monster in all PvE content. I enjoyed making this build. I've loved it a lot, and I think you're going to enjoy it as well. If you enjoyed the video though, and you have any changes, of course, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know about the video. Let me know what other builds you would like to see. I know I have the Strand video for Titan still having to come out, but I wanted to go ahead and put this Void one out because I think it's fantastic. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.